I wanted to get into the last part of the Maimer. You have to understand how this Maimer works. This is a Maimer about the Pshim B'Yachoy, and it goes off talking about Amudim, about columns. So we spent a lot of time on the Amudim. And I didn't want to spend another day, and it wouldn't have been a day, it would have been 3 more days reviewing it. So I left yesterday's discussion, lecture, I didn't write questions for yesterday's class. I may still do it, but I want to continue, okay? I want to tell you what I told you yesterday in a sentence. The one sentence review of yesterday's class is, Chassidus is, Pnimius HaTorah is higher than Nigla the Torah. But it's much more difficult for it to be correct. That's the statement. Because Nigla the Torah is anchored in bittul. Nigla the Torah is anchored in action. And because Nigla Torah, it anchors it in looking for the truth of the halacha. If you learn the Samach Vav, you see how the Rebbe Rashab celebrates the Tanoim who were sitting in darkness. The Ruach HaKodesh subsided. They went away. And they were looking for Mitosa Shel Torah with great intellectual intensity and Mesiras Nefesh for exactitude and preciseness. You have to understand how I understand this. And I think that my source of this is in Teirei Chassidus. In the time of the first Beis HaMikdash, the essence of Yiddishkeit was Nevuah, was spirituality, what you and I would call Chassidus. When the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, the Anshe Knesset Gdela made the conscious decision to go away from a religion based on spirituality, on Nevuah, on Chassidus, and go to a Yiddishkeit based on intellectualism, on Nigle, on Lomdus. It was a conscious decision to go away from spirituality centrism towards intellectual and scholastic centrism. Why? Because they saw that the Ruach HaKodesh was going away, and when the Ruach HaKodesh goes away, if you look for spirituality without Ruach HaKodesh, you're going to end up a crackpot. You're going to go nuts. So again, the statement is, Pnimius HaTorah is higher than Nigla. But Nigla has to be the anchor, because the credibility of Torah is more easily preserved than Nigla than in Pnimius, primarily because of the Maaseh. What hasn't changed over 3,000 years? That was Tefillin. The meaning of Tefillin, how you learn Tefillin, the Pupil, the Lamdas, that may change. Tefillin doesn't change. A matzah doesn't change. A lulav doesn't change. That's strict Nigla. Those ideas were not extracted from Kabbalah. They were extracted by studying the Chumash with a very fine-toothed comb and looking for emes and looking for emes and looking for emes and finding emes. So what's higher, Pnimius and Nigla? Of course, Pnimius. But the whole by Pnimius, you have to be Rab Shem B'Yachoy. Otherwise, it could be dangerous, and that's what this Maimer is about. Because Mashiach's coming. No, you should ask 2 questions. Why did Baal Shem Tov go back to Pnimius, and why are the Misnagdim wrong? The Misnagdim were defending the status quo. The status quo is that we went away from Pnimius to Nigla. And they were 100% right. Not one thing. It says in Zohar, as B'Seif Yemai, at the end of time, we're going to reveal Pnimius HaTorah. And beginning with the times of the Arizal, Muter, Mitzvah, Legal, Zoysa Chochma. Until then, it was also, it's permitted, and it's even a mitzvah to reveal Pnimius HaTorah. And that if you don't learn Pnimius HaTorah, you can't go. Mehai Chibura de Loch, the E who Sefer Hazeir, Yipkun B'nei Yisrael Mibei Galusa Berachmi. Understand the Aramaic? I heard the Rebbe say this. With your holy book, 1 second, which is the book of Zohar. The Jewish, you know what? Go through the pile and give everybody. The few more guys came in. Cohen with a K, that's him. We're going to go out of Golos. So you have a very interesting interface. For a long time, the Frum Yidden made Nigla more important than Bnister. Faked, the Tztukim were into Kabbalah. It's Man by Sheni, the Tztukim wanted to hold on to the derech of spirituality and prophecy. And you know where they ended up? In Christianity. You know what Christianity is? Bittul mitzvahs. This doesn't show him. You don't do mitzvahs anymore. Just philosophy. And you see exactly what I just described to you played out exactly. When you go away from mitzvahs, you could say the spirituality could be any way you want. Ruchnius by itself, how you know it's true? You see what I'm saying? And It all began because they said, listen, it's man bayis rishon. For 1,000 years, the most important thing in Yiddishkeit was nevuah, was spirituality, ruchnius. Okay, mitzvahs are important, but the point of it is to have, quote, a personal relationship with the Eibishter. Why are we giving it up? And the Anshe Chassidus were right. They were not Chassidish. They were not Chassidish. They were not Chassidish. They were Litvish. They were Yeshivish. But at that time, it was right. And then came the beginning of the emergence of Kabbalah, right? It's Manat Anoim, the generation of Rashbi. And then later on, it came back again. It brought in Svarim that the Baha'i Gon, the Pardes brings Tshuvas and Kabbalah from the Baha'i Gon. The modern people go crazy about it. And you have to also give, everybody else has.
Yeah.
Okay. They go crazy. They say this Nishtemis, this Tshuvas of Baha'i Gon and Kabbalah, which are quoted by the Pardes, the Ramak. But then you have the Rishonim, who were the great Kabbalists. There was a famous person now in Avram Abulefia. He's considered the father of Kabbalah. He was a very controversial man. But there was also the Ramban after him. The Ramban was probably in Zman HaShas, Meretnish, I'm saying, but it was lost. The Chochmah was lost at some point, and then it was rediscovered. It's hard to know for how long it was lost. According to the Yosef Jiklaya, the Shemer Amunim, the Zohar was rediscovered in Zman HaGo'onim.
But you have, who was Rabbi Yossi Paltiel, maybe? No, somebody else. Who taught everybody all the American Kabbalah.
Okay, it's true. It's in the Shas, but it was lost. The Chacham was lost at some point and was rediscovered at a later point. So the later point is the Rabbeim of the Ramban, Rabbi Zriel and Rabbi Uziel, and the Yitzchak Sadi Nor, who was the son of the Ravid. These were famous Mekubalim of Zman HaRishonim. And then of course the Chassidi Ashkenaz, Yehuda HaChassid, Rabbi Avraham HaChassid, Rabbi Yeina of Grundi, and these people were big Mekubalim. And then when they found the Zohar, that changed it all. They found the Zohar, that changed everything. Because the Zohar, go wash your hands, here, go wash your hands. There was so much Kabbalah. The Zohar was not a little bit of no Kabbalah, it was a ton of no Kabbalah. And then you have the Talmidim of Rabbi Avalafia, Rabbi Yosef Jiklaya. They wrote classic works of Kabbalah. And then, of course, the two. Did you give Menachem Mendel his? Did you give Menachem Mendel his? He was here before. He walked in and walked out. Menachem Mendel. The great Kabbalists that really sort of anchored Kabbalah for us are three people. Rab Meir ben Gabbai, who wrote the Sefer Avodas HaKodesh, which Chassidus quotes. Rab Moshe Kordaviru, the Ramak, who wrote the Sefer HaPardes and tons of other Svarim, and the Arizal, the Yitzchak Lo Ashkenazi. These were the classic Mekubalim who you know, our Kabbalah is based on them.
Who was the first one?
The first one is Avodas HaKodesh, which is quoted in Chassidus a lot. Rabbi Slavin, did you not give me back the Maimer one day after class?
You didn't get one yet.
Oh, come on. You got several. Let's see. What do we got here? Let me take this. Do me a favor, write your name on it and give it back to me. So from the times of about 700-800 years ago, Kabbalah reemerged. And people began to teach it, and it became very controversial. And then from the times of the Arizal, and by us, in Chabad, the Arizal is a place of I don't know if you know this, my father-in-law told me this, that there's in the Sefer Beis Rivka, there's a letter from the Alter Rebbe. There's two letters from the Alter Rebbe. Where you just went to wash your hands. You just went to wash your hands. Your shoes. Okay. There's a letter from the Alter Rebbe in the Sefer Beis Rivka where he discusses debating the Vilna Gaon. But in other words, to solve the machlokes, Chassidim and Misnagdim, the Alter Rebbe tried twice to meet the Vilna Gaon. It didn't work out. But there was a question Alter Rebbe debated the Vilna Gaon, and the Alter Rebbe says in one of his letters, I cannot debate the Vilna Gaon in Kabbalah because we Chassidim believe that Kol Devara Mepi Eliyahu, every word of that Arizal Eliyahu Navis. We don't argue with that Arizal. And the Vilna Gaon Shita was Shmu Azu No, Shmu Azu Ein No. he considers the Arizal a great Makubal, but he doesn't consider him a psak, that you must follow the Arizal. So I can't have a debate with him because we have different terms. But anyway, getting back to our point, so you asked a great question. You asked a very wonderful question. And it's a great, you gave me an opportunity to clarify. That's why we are behind the eight ball. We had an obligation to defend ourselves. Because we were making the change. The Elam Misha was saying, and the truth of the matter is, it didn't start with Chassidus. It starts with Sfardim. Chassidus is 300 years old. The Kabbalah centricity by Sfardim goes back 500-600 years. The idea that you change Minhagim, you change the Siddur, you change Minhagim based on Zohar, based on Kabbalah, didn't start with Chassidus. It started by the Sfardim. Sfardim are doing it 300 years before us, from the times of the Arizal, 20 years before us. But Chassidim were an Ashkenaz movement, and Ashkenazim were very proud, and they still are very proud of being Ashkenaz. And we were making changes. We changes in the Nusach, we changes in a lot of things. Anyway, so again, the point is that Chassidus is higher than Nigla. But Chassidus is very precarious. Pnimius HaTorah, I don't want to call this. The face of Torah is higher than the body of Torah, no doubt about it. But the face of Torah doesn't have the anchor that the body of Torah has, which is the combination of yirah, fear, and action, based on the study of Torah Shabbal Peh, with great Mesiras Nefesh, interpreting the Psukim of the Torah. So it's much harder for Pnimius HaTorah to have integrity than Nigla. But when Pnimius HaTorah has integrity, it's higher. It's the face of Torah. Okay? And in the language of this Maimed, if Nigla the Torah, if Chitzenius Torah is the body of this Amud, of this beam, of this column, Pnimius HaTorah is the hollow which is inside. Now let's go to let's start the next paragraph, 673. Let's start the second paragraph, last paragraph of the page. Please look inside. With this entire expose, where we talked about a lot of stuff. We talked about Maisim Teva. We talked about Torah mitzvahs. And we talked about Kavona and Maiseh. In other words, we talked about Nigla and Nister, Chitzonius and Pnimius. But in this Maimer, in contrast to many other Maimerim, we're prioritizing Pnimius. We're making Pnimius higher than Nigla. Even though in 100 Maimerim, you'll see the most important thing is action, and action is Nigla. The most important thing is doing the tefillin. Not what the tefillin mean. But in this Maimer, the priority is Pnimius HaTorah. When you understand, and to use yesterday's form as a basis, that it's much harder for Pnimius HaTorah to have integrity, much harder, so much more dangerous. Because when you deal in the realms of spirituality and philosophy, you could literally say anything you want, and for someone to see through it, and to know that it's sheker is much more difficult. But if someone's Pnimius HaTorah is emes, Pnimius HaTorah is higher than Chitzenius HaTorah, that tells you who Rab Shimon Bar Yochai was, and that tells you how we celebrate or commemorate his yahrzeit. In Halacha it says that when a tzaddik passes away, you fast. I have met Jews, physical Jews, actual Jews in El Mazah HaMaiseh, who I met a Yid who told me today, I'm fasting, I can't eat. I said, why are you fasting? Because it's the yahrzeit of my father, the yahrzeit of my mother. It's a halacha in Shulchan Aruch, Tainis Yom Shemeis Boi Ova Ve'imah. There's a concept in Jewish law to fast on the day that your father passed away, to fast on the day that your mother passed away. Could you close the doors, Menachem Mendel, and to fast on the day that your Rebbe passed away? Why? So it says in Halachas and Rambam, as we all know, that fasting is tshuva. And when you fast and you're hungry and you're vulnerable and you're weak, it makes you focus on your limitations. And it brings you close. Machnias alev, it subdues your heart and brings you closer to the Eibishter. All of that is not happy. All of that is earnest. All of that is almost sad. Comes again Rab Shimon Bar Yochai and tells us Talmidim before he passes away. I'm on my way out. We're going to learn Kabbalah until my neshama leaves the guf. We're going to learn Seyas HaTorah until God kisses me and my neshama is sucked out of my guf and taken l'mayla. And you're going to sing and dance. And they did it. I have heard as a child yet, and I don't know how true it is, that they went to the Mittel Rebbe. Mittel Rebbe is very much Rab Shimon Bar Yochai. Passed away the same way, and you don't say Chassidus. They went to the Mittel Rebbe's Levaya, crying and singing. The Rebbe Gehasen Feilach. They went to his Levaya, Mittel Rebbe's Levaya, singing. The Rebbe said we should be besimcha by his Levaya, because it was the same Indian of Shem Bar Yochai. Let's read it. Mashedavka histalkos Rab Shimon by Yechoi. The histalkos, the neshama leaving the guf, as it relates, Rab Shimon by Yechoi, Nikra Hilula is called a holiday. It's called a Yom Tov. Hilula means Simchas Chasna, the greatest joy imaginable. Why? Rab Shimon by Yechoi Gila, as I saw from there, I said, Rab Shimon by Yechoi revealed the secret Torah, the Pnimius HaTorah. Hainu, in other words, Baruch, I've gotten about a whole year you spoiled me, so lately I've... Hainu, Bechinas Pnimius HaTorah, the face of Torah. Turn the page, please. Shebo hu ikir inyan ha'amud. And in Pnimius HaTorah is the primary concept of this column, of this beam. Ha'poyol ikir ha'hiluch b'li gevul, which is the real basis for being in motion in an infinite way. As we discussed earlier in the Maimer, you become infinite when you do what God says. You become infinite when you're doing Torah and mitzvahs. You become infinite when you're involved in Pnimis HaTorah, when you're involved in godliness on a level which is above worldliness. And for the 15th time, godliness which is above worldliness is higher than worldliness. But godliness above worldliness, if it's not perfect, it's a sin. It has to be exact. And Ashbi was that individual. Rabbi Shimon Yochai was able to reveal Pnimis HaTorah, that although it's oil, it's light, it's so ephemeral. Look up the word ephemeral in the dictionary. It's spelled with a PH. It's a Chassidish word. It's elusive. It's so hard to hold. It's so hard to anchor. It's so hard to give credibility to. But if and when you do, it's Amitasa Shel Torah. Rabbi Shimon Yochai had those capabilities. And because Rabbi Shimon Yochai had those capabilities, Rabbi Shimon Yochai revealed it. And that's why Rabbi Shimon Yochai's Torah is the real infinity of history. The Rebbe used to say all the time, that Alter Rebbe says in Shulchan Aruch, Hilchos Talmud Torah, Alter Rebbe says in Shulchan Aruch, that Nigla the Torah is finite. And the true proof is that halachically you're mechuyev to complete the whole Limud Nigla. You're mechuyev to learn everything. That means learn Tanakh, obviously, Shas Bali and Yerushalmi and all the Midrashim, the Rishonim, the Poskim, the Shulchan Aruch and the Achreinim. And the Alter Rebbe writes in Shulchan Aruch that there were people who completed Kol HaTorah Kula. And the Rebbe used to say it. And when the Rebbe would say it, you could hear him talking about himself. The Rebbe knew Kol HaTorah Kula bepashtus. He knew every book that was worthwhile. I mean, every book written today, he knew that too. But that's not part of the requirement. He knew every sefer. When the Rebbe was in Berlin, there's a guy, he was the secretary of Chaim Berlin Yeshiva. His father was in Berlin. When the Rebbe was in Berlin, there was a very famous Gaon there. His name was, I'm very bad with names. His name, I'm not going to remember his name. Famous, one of the great Gaon of the last generation. And the Rebbe used to come into his Beis Medrash. He had a Beis Medrash L'Rabbonim in Berlin. And the young man walked in. The father of this man was telling the story. He says, my father knew the Rebbe in the 30s in Berlin. The Rebbe knew Kol HaTorah Kula. He was 30 years old. He knew the whole Torah. But that's only Nigla. Nister is Arucha Meretz Mido Rachava Miniyam. Pnimius HaTorah is infinite. The infinity of Torah is in the Pnimius HaTorah. And Rabbi Shimon Yochai represents that. Rabbi Shimon Yochai is that idea. V'yesh lefarish hakavana bazeh. We're going to read on. The meaning of this is the Sh'ara Tzadikim, second line. The second line of page 674. Other tzaddikim, ikar aveidasam begoli, hoise begalia, the Torah, their primary occupation, at least that we know about, was nigla the Torah. And nigla Torah means starting the oizes of Torah and translate from the Torah. What am I supposed to do? And you must understand, when you attach Torah to what am I supposed to do, there's two things here. The action becomes an anchor. The fact that you're going to do something becomes a way of keeping you from going crazy. And there's another factor which is brought to Amar Chassidus, that when a Rav learns Torah, he enjoys it. When a Rav paskins a halacha, he fears it. Everybody would love to be a student of Torah, but nobody would be responsible for the decisions he makes. Fundamentally disturbing Mashiach. I'm sorry. You have to speak to that Hola. Someone has to come and tell me official. Rabbi Secretary has to come tell me. Okay, I'm in the middle of a class. As soon as he tells me to stop, I'll stop. I'll stop in the middle of a sentence. Send him a message. Send him over text. Okay, Okay, Rabbi say, please.
Okay, so hold up.
Samach, I will stop, but please don't stop me. Okay, Rabbi Tzakarik has to tell me. It's his job. Nigla the Torah is finite. Pnimius Torah has no limit. It's infinite. So other Tanoim. So wait, I was saying this. There's two things you have to know about Nigla. Number one, Nigla the Torah is focused on action. When you're learning the Gemara, learn the psukim of the Chumash to extract what's going to be the mission of the Gemara. You're focused on what I'm going to do based on that. That's an anchor. It holds you. And then there's the other thing. God forbid I make a mistake. The Rebbe Rashab describes in Samach Vov how much fun learning Torah is and how frightful being a Rav is. Paskining a halacha is the most frightening thing. That's why Chassidus says, where does Yira and Limud Torah converge? Limud Torah is not Yira, it's Ava, it's delicious. Where does fear and the study of Torah come together? The answer is when you have to paskin halacha l'maisa, because you're afraid. And that's what Nigla gives you, that combination. A, from what I'm going to interpret, people are going to do something. B, if I make a mistake, you know the story with the Dalet and the Reish. Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Lo yeh lecha Elokim acherim al ponai. You had a little yud. Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Acher. The biggest aved in the Torah. Lo yeh lecha Elokim Echad al ponai. The biggest aved. It's a dot in the back of an os. That this is the Gemara. That changes something which is the highest idea to the lowest idea. The whole nigla is a hair. That's the mile of nigla. But it's finite. Pnimius doesn't have those anchors. That's why Pnimius is so, it has to be. I told this to you yesterday. Our Rabbeim, when it comes to nigla, quote everybody. Everybody. I'll tell you just a good lashon hara for you to take on the roller coasters. The Rebbe had issues with the Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi was a gadol b'Yisrael. He knew kol ha'Torah kula. He was a bokish enkomayim. He was like the father. He was the Rebbe of the Sfardim in Lomdus and Allah. The Rebbe had issues. The Rebbe wouldn't see him. So there was once a look at the sichos on a topic that the Rabbi Yossi has in his chuvas. I think it's called lyhadus. I forgot the name of his chuvas are. The guys working on the sichos didn't know what to do. Because Rabbi Yossi doesn't have a few words. Rabbi has a whole discussion, which was apparently similar to the Rebbe's discussion. So they didn't know, because the Rebbe always wanted that there shouldn't be a Maramokah missing. The Rebbe once wrote to them that if you miss one Maramokah, what happened? And Rabbi Soloveitchik sees it and is going to say this is Davasheni Mesukah. They had to get every single Makkah right. So they gave him the Sikha to the Rebbe, and they wrote a note that, by the way, Rabbi Yossi has a tshuva on this thing. So the Rebbe took his pen, and he made a star on the title of the Sikha. Let's say it was Pachas Yes. He made a star, and he wrote the first footnote. This sugya is found in the tshuva of a god of Rabbi Yossi Paltiel. He put it. He's gonna what? The Rebbe's afraid. The first footnote is, and this goes back when I was a bach. It goes back 40 years. He was very much alive. You should understand that there's another gadol b'Yisrael alive today who has a sugya this. If you want the first footnote, but when it comes to Kabbalah, you can count on one hand, Kemat, how many Sfarim they quote, and which quotes from those Sfarim they bring. There's very few Kabbalah Sfarim that we bring carte blanche. Most Kabbalah Sfarim we don't quote, and the few that we do quote, it's the same few quotes over and over again. Why? Because Kabbalah, if it's not perfect, you can go away who knows where. That's why you have to be Al Ruach HaKodesh. That's why you have to be Rashbi. But if you're Rashbi, if you're that person, so your Torah is infinite. And if your Torah is infinite, you're the one who makes it into a mahalach. So where's my message?
Maybe always takes forever to respond to me.
You're going to hit the message at 10 o'clock.